You know, sometimes history isn't about grand battles between empires or the rise and fall of great leaders. Sometimes history is just plain bizarre. And what if I told you there was a time, not so long ago, when a nation actually declared war on a bird? Not a metaphor, not a cartoon, but a real, live military operation, complete with machine guns, strategy, and a very unexpected outcome. We're talking about the Great Emu War of 1932, a chapter in Australian history that sounds more like a Monty Python sketch than a serious military campaign. It's a story of human ingenuity meeting avian resilience, and it's surprisingly profound in its absurdity. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what strange battles we've forgotten. This isn't just a funny anecdote, it's a peek into the unique challenges of a nation, the desperation of its people, and the sometimes unpredictable consequences of trying to control nature. It's a tale that reminds us that even the most serious intentions can lead to the most unbelievable scenarios. Before we dive into this utterly wild piece of history, if you're as fascinated by these hidden and bizarre tales from our past as I am, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Your support helps us uncover more of these incredible untold stories. Imagine yourself back in 1932. The world is in the grip of the Great Depression. Economies are crumbling, jobs are scarce, and folks everywhere are just trying to survive. Down in Western Australia, specifically in a region called Campion, things were particularly tough for the farmers. They were primarily ex-soldiers, veterans of World War I, who had been granted land by the government to start wheat farms. They were resilient, hardworking, and used to facing tough conditions. They'd cultivated vast fields of wheat, pouring their sweat and meager resources into the land, hoping for a decent harvest that would keep their families afloat. They relied entirely on those crops for their livelihoods, to pay their debts, and to simply put food on the table. It was a struggle, but they were doing it. Then, nature decided to throw in an unexpected and frankly, enormous wrench. You see, this area was home to the emu, Australia's largest native bird. Emus are big. They can stand up to 6 feet tall and weigh over 100 pounds. And while they normally roam in smaller groups, this particular year, because of a severe drought inland, thousands upon thousands of these birds started migrating towards the coastal farming regions, looking for water and food. And where did they find their food? Right in the farmers' hard-won wheat fields. Picture it, a massive, feathered army, tens of thousands strong, descending on your crops. They weren't just eating the wheat, they were trampling it, knocking down fences, letting rabbits and other pests into the fields. It was an absolute ecological disaster for these struggling farmers. They watched in despair as their entire year's labor, their only hope, was being devoured and destroyed by these relentless, flightless birds. It was heartbreaking to witness. The farmers were desperate. They tried everything they could think of, scarecrows, loud noises, even trying to herd the birds away. Nothing worked. The emus just kept coming, wave after feathered wave. So, they did what any rational, desperate citizens would do. They appealed to the government for help. They wrote letters. They sent petitions, begging for military assistance. Now, you might think, why the military? Why not pest control? Well, these were ex-soldiers, remember? They understood military solutions. And the government, wanting to show support for its veteran farmers and facing a genuine agricultural crisis, decided on a truly extraordinary measure. They agreed to send in the Royal Australian Artillery. Yes, you heard that right. The actual army. In charge of this unique military operation was Major G.P.W. Meredith, a veteran of World War I, along with 2 soldiers. And their weapons of choice? Not rifles, not bombs, but 2 Lewis automatic machine guns, each capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, along with 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan was to use these powerful weapons to cull the emu population, driving them away from the farmlands. The public, and certainly the press, watched with a mixture of amusement and anticipation. Who would have thought this would be a thing? So, on November 2nd, 1932, Major Meredith and his small contingent arrived in Campion. The stage was set for what the media quickly dubbed the Emu War. The soldiers probably expected a straightforward operation. Find the birds, set up the machine. Guns, open fire. Easy, right? Oh, how wrong they were. The very first encounters were nothing short of a comedic disaster from the human perspective. The emus, it turned out, were not easy targets. They were incredibly fast, reaching speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour, about 30 miles per hour. They were also surprisingly agile, scattering and zigzagging at the first sign of danger. Imagine trying to hit a moving target that's constantly changing direction and has an uncanny ability to disappear into the scrubland. Major Meredith later reported on the surprising tactics of the enemy. If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. On the first day, they attempted an ambush near a waterhole. About 50 emus were spotted. The machine guns opened fire, but the birds simply scattered, seemingly unharmed. The soldiers fired again and again, but the emus proved remarkably difficult to hit. They managed to kill only a few dozen birds that day, a dismal return for the amount of ammunition expended. The next few days brought similar frustrations. They tried mounting a machine gun on a truck, hoping to pursue the birds. But the truck couldn't keep up with the emu's speed on the rough terrain, and the gunner couldn't aim effectively while bouncing around. The emus, almost as if coordinated, would split into smaller, fast-moving groups, making mass targeting impossible. They proved to be surprisingly intelligent and adaptive adversaries. It was like fighting ghosts in feathers. The public, reading the newspaper reports, was either laughing or shaking their heads in disbelief. A nation's army, armed with modern weaponry, was being outsmarted by birds. It was becoming clear that this war was going to be much harder and much more embarrassing than anyone had anticipated. The initial days of the war had been nothing short of humiliating for the Australian military. Major Meredith and his men tried every trick in their book. They attempted to herd the emus towards the machine guns, hoping to funnel them into a killing zone. But the emus seemed to possess an uncanny ability to anticipate human movements. They wouldn't cooperate. If a large flock was sighted, they would instantly break ranks and scatter in multiple directions, making it impossible for the machine guns to get a sustained burst on more than a few at a time. It was like trying to shoot individual raindrops in a thunderstorm. The soldiers spent days driving around in trucks, trying to get close enough, but the dusty, uneven terrain made accurate shooting from a moving vehicle practically impossible. The gun barrels would bounce, the targets would dart, and most of the ammunition would fly harmlessly into the vast Australian bush. They were burning through their precious 10,000 rounds with very little to show for it. Major Meredith himself, a seasoned military man, was clearly baffled. He described the emus' uncoordinated tactics, which, ironically, made them incredibly effective. They didn't group up like soldiers. They acted like a chaotic, independent swarm, each bird an unpredictable blur of feathers and speed. It was maddening. Imagine the frustration, the dust, the heat, and the sheer exhaustion of chasing after these giant, mocking birds day after day with minimal success. The morale must have been interesting, to say the least. As the days turned into a week, reports of the war's disastrous progress began to hit the newspapers, not just in Australia, but around the world. The story was simply too absurd to ignore. Headlines declared the Emu War a complete failure, and cartoonists had a field day. Images of a tiny Major Meredith facing off against giant, laughing emus filled the papers. The British press, in particular, found the whole affair highly amusing, often portraying the Australian military as incompetent. One British ornithologist even quipped, the few emus which had escaped were living peacefully, having developed an avoidance of the military through their own personal experiences. It became a global joke. The Australian public, initially amused, quickly became embarrassed. Here was their army, equipped with a machine gun, failing spectacularly against a flock of birds, while the country was still reeling from the Depression. It wasn't exactly a proud moment. The farmers, meanwhile, were no better off. The machine guns might have killed a few hundred emus, but tens of thousands more continued to wreak havoc on their crops. By mid-November, after approximately a week of continuous effort, Major Meredith and his men were recalled. The operation was officially deemed a failure. The military leadership back in Canberra had seen enough. The cost of ammunition, the lack of results, and the growing public ridicule simply weren't worth it. The official count of emus killed during this first, main phase of the war varies slightly, but generally hovers around less than 1,000 birds. For 10,000 rounds of ammunition, that's an incredibly inefficient use of resources, an average of 10 bullets per emu, and many more shot for every one hit. Major Meredith, despite his best efforts and reports, probably felt a sting of defeat. He and his men were pulled out, leaving the farmers to face their feathered adversaries once again, albeit without the firepower. In a strange way, the emus had won. They had effectively repelled a military assault, demonstrating an unexpected intelligence and adaptability that completely flummoxed human strategy. They simply kept running, scattering, and surviving. While there were a couple of smaller, less publicized attempts to redeploy soldiers and machine guns in the following years, also with limited success, the infamous Great Emu War of November 1932 remains the definitive chapter of this quirky conflict. So what does this truly bizarre slice of history teach us? Nature's resilience. It's a humbling reminder that nature, in its vastness and complexity, often operates on its own terms. Humans, despite all our technology and ingenuity, are not always the masters we presume to be. Sometimes, the simplest creatures can outwit our most sophisticated plans. Unintended consequences. What started as a logical military solution to an agricultural problem quickly spiraled into an embarrassing, costly, and ultimately futile exercise. It highlights how interventions, even with good intentions, can lead to unforeseen and comical outcomes. The human spirit of problem-solving and humor despite the frustration. The story is told with a certain Australian dry wit and resilience. It showcases humanity's determination to tackle problems, even when those problems come in the form of a 6-foot-tall bird. And it certainly gives us a good laugh now. Learning from failure. While a failure in its immediate goal, the emu war remains a fascinating historical footnote that continues to entertain and educate. It teaches us about adaptation, the limits of force, and the enduring power of a good story. The Great Emu War stands as a testament to the fact that history isn't just about solemn moments and grand achievements. Sometimes it's about the utterly ridiculous, the unexpected, and the very human struggle against forces that simply refuse to play by our rules. And in its absurdity, it offers its own unique wisdom. What do you think is the wildest part of the Great Emu War? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this untold tale has left you amused and intrigued, please give this video a like and subscribe to this channel for more incredible and bizarre stories from our past. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey.